Hello, and welcome to today's HR Unstoppable and Irresistible, new model for employee engagement and experience. Today's webcast is sponsored by Achievers. Achievers' employee success platform delivers proven employee recognition, continuous listening tools, and timely coaching tips for organizations to give their people ownership of the employee experience and to drive organizational success. To learn more, visit achievers.com. My name is Laura, and I'll be your HR Daily Advisor host for today's event. Before we get started, we need to go over a few housekeeping items so we can get you familiar with the platform. The console you're looking at right now offers multiple application widgets that you can use. You can resize any of these widgets or move them around and minimize them as you wish. Then there's a media player button where you can play with the volume of the presentation. Please take note that there's no dial-in for today's event. The audio will be streaming directly from your computer speakers. A copy of today's slide deck is located in the resource list widget, the green widget at the bottom of your screen. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the help widget. There's a question mark icon and covers most technical errors. If your technical issues do not resolve, please enter a question in the Q&A widget and our team will gladly assist you. All right, now please join me in welcoming today's guest speaker to the floor, Jason Troy of Jason Troy Executive Coaching. Jason is a leadership and performance executive coach for executives, managers, employees, and business owners. He provides coaching, workshops, keynote speaking, and other services. He helps them achieve their most ambitious goals by mastering key leadership, management, and teamwork skills and best practices. He coaches them to overcome crippling self-doubt, negativity, blind spots, and insecurities that hold him back. Jason, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be back. It's been a few months, and I'm excited to present the webinar today. The last time I was on, I had a lot of great interactions with people, wonderful questions, and some great follow-ups as well. So today we will be going over a lot of material, and we're going at a rapid pace. So feel free to ask any questions, share issues, challenges, or concerns that you're having, and then after the webinar itself, you'll have my email, and feel free to contact me with any questions. If you need any resources or other help, I'm happy to help you because I want to make this a valuable experience for you. And I also want to thank you for attending today because I know you could be anywhere, and you're here today with us. And I want to wish you happy holidays. No matter whether you celebrate or not, I think it's a great opportunity to just celebrate this time of the year. And a couple things I would encourage you to do that will be really helpful, and you'll see a lot of value in it, is one, is to get you and your team to email, or I would say text or email people in the next meeting that you have. And you do that and send messages to people that you want to thank for helping you. And how you do that is a couple sentences. One, thanking them, tell them what they did and how it impacted you, right? I think you can do the same thing as you go around your team and your next team meeting, and you'll see a significant difference in how people react to you, their happiness, motivation, and engagement. So there's a couple holiday little things that you can do that will make a difference no matter where you're at. So today we're going to talk about employee engagement, employee experience, because today the world of work is rapidly changing. I think the HR profession, people management, people operations, whatever you want to call it, is really the differentiator, right? Human performance is what separates out organizations themselves because everyone has access to the same software engineers, the same people, right? And at the end of the day, you can only hire so much of them. It's what do you get out of them? And how can you retain and develop them and get them to work together, right? Both as a talent across your organization and also your leadership. And so that's really one of the key aspects of this. And I want to go over and explain to you how you can create an employee experience that is going to make a major difference in your organization. And we're going to be going over how to do that at a high level, some of the basics, then going over the fundamentals, and also a foundational layer of how you start setting this up and really getting results starting today. So today we're going to go through these three things, right? Why this is all happening, how to engineer it, and really strategies and tools and things that you can use and go about. So I've gone and I've done this for a lot, right? This year, I've spoken at 75 events, at least, and counting. And I've spoken to probably anywhere between 15 to 20,000 people, interviewed them, talked to them, really delved into what are their challenges around the people and processes around them and developing them. And so I have a lot of data here today, a lot of the data I'll be sharing. There's other ones I don't, so feel free to ask away any questions that you might have through it. We went over some of my background in doing this. I also have a book, Social Wealth, that's really done well. I have a game called Cards Against Mundanity that builds trust and teamwork and communication. And after the webinar, if you want a copy, just email me and I'll send you one. So one of the things I think that in today's world of work that people really don't understand is that it's great all the perks people are giving people, but end of the day, the perks and a lot of the other things around their workplace experience really go to the backdrop, and they're almost like plumbing. So when you think about commuting expenses, I know some people get those, food, other things, they seem nice, but those costs are spiraling out of control. I think in the last year, they've gone up 32% for companies and organizations. And when I talk to people, it goes back to the same thing. They want to do great work. They want to accomplish something at the end of every day, right? A Harvard professor went and looked at journals of thousands of people across all these different industries and look what they wrote. And essentially at the end of it, when they had a great day, they had accomplished something. And so we need to remember that as a fundamental step as we're working on this to really look at the total employee experience. And when it comes down, the four things across all the research that I've seen that move the needle, and if you don't have these in place, you might as well forget doing everything else. Those are the leaves on the tree, not the root. Is people want to feel a sense of connection, right? They want to be close to the people that are around them, right? Trust is an absolute essential, right? They've done research. If you look in Harvard Business Review's May issue, they did a huge study on trust with leaders, managers, and across the board. And that's the number one factor in most of the studies for a great employee experience, right? The other part of it is caring. And you want to be around people that care about you. And I've now walked and saw and interacted with probably 100 to 120 top 1% teams. And they were at the top ranked in their organization across geographies and everything else. At the end of the day, one of the common characteristics is really the fact that these people cared about each other and they had each other's backs and they were willing to help each other. The fourth part is really the contribution part. And again, it gets back to doing the work and finding meaning and achieving something every day. And those may seem like, wow, those are airy-fairy, but those are really the fundamental things in place if you're doing research, and you have to have them there. You know, I know you've seen a lot of this data on the competitive advantage that people have, so I'm not going to spend a lot on this. I have tons of it if you need it. But I do think when you're presenting these to management and leadership and to boards and other people, the data is really important to share, because it moves people, because there's so much compelling data that moves the bottom line metrics. And when you show that, it's much harder for them to avoid the conversation and actually the investment itself today. So here's a chart. I just want to show you this again, that is about company and performance when it comes down to what's going on and the difference between high performers. This is a study from that I found not that long ago over a very long period of time, looking at more than 500 companies. And you'll see the top companies, the top 30, have a significant difference in how they're performing across the board, which you're seeing in purple. And if you look at these purple, right, and you look at the top, those are the areas they're focusing on that really differentiate them from, right? It's the inspiration, drive, trust, growth, right, and the focus that they have as an organization. And that really comes down to the employee experience. It's not a lot of the other things that you may think it is. They have these instilled. Now, the one part of it I would disagree in the collaboration part, because what I've seen across the board is poor collaboration and poor communication is the #1 challenge for teams and organizations across the board. And it's something that as I talk to people all the time in CHROs, like I did 2 weeks ago, they're struggling with how do we get people to work together effectively. But the other ones are the things that are differentiating those companies and performing at those levels, because they went in and dug and looked at the things that separate them out. And now I want to go into briefly, like, what's the difference between these words? I think the challenge is these words are always used, like interoperable, like culture too. And so how I define employee experience is really the whole set of when an employee joins all the way through the entire life cycle, right? It has to do with engagement, performance management, hiring, onboarding, right? The entire journey that they have. The engagement part of it is really coming down to their performance, productivity, right, and happiness. And when you look at it, engagement and productivity are flip sides of each other, right? They're the other side of the coin. And so they're interoperably linked, and you have to focus on that. So I look at engagement as part of the employee experience. And so I want to go through today some human capital trends that I'm seeing that are really sticking out, this year, and we should see them obviously continue moving forward. One is, as I talk to people are overwhelmed at every level, right? They're struggling with what to do, their time, all the interruptions, right? So focus is huge in order to help them going forward. And the problem that this leads to is the fear of missing out, right? I mean, you could also, another word for this for some people is imposter syndrome, like they're not measuring up. They're not sure where to spend their time. They're not sure what skills to develop. They're, in essence, lost at one point or another. They come on this, and because of all the things that are happening around them, and the distractions are really high, so it's hard to focus and know if what you're doing is the right thing. And the next thing is the job skills, right? The soft skills now are becoming imperative, right? LinkedIn said that 92% of employers believe that they're even more important than hard skills or just as important. And I call them the power skills because these are the things that separate it out. And when you look at the human performance that we talked about in the beginning, these are the ones that make the difference. When you look at all the data that separate out great leaders, great managers, great talent, these are the areas to focus on. And when you take a look at communication, right, all the data shows that the hottest skill set now in places like Silicon Valley is oral communication. I mean, people have a hard time speaking, presenting, especially listening, right? Their ability to work in teams and get the most out of other people is really not that great. And they don't know how to do it. And teamwork is a strategy and a skill set. It is not something that you just throw people together and expect them to figure out, because they won't. And then the creativity and problem solving comes up on every list, because at the end of the day, we're all faced with challenges. We all have to be creative, and we all have to try to problem solve, not only in the things that we do, but helping other people. And now when you take a look at, like, the other trend that's happening is, why are people leaving? And you're really seeing this with millennials, Gen Z, right? They want to learn, grow, and develop, and they are thirsty for knowledge. The #1 complaint I get, and actually this is not across all ages, is the fact that their managers are not spending enough time with them, giving them feedback or coaching and mentoring them. So it's something to keep in mind that is one of the biggest reasons I find that people say, because they're like, well, if I can't develop and I can't learn and grow, why am I at this company? Now, the other part of it is really a lack of connection and caring. And when people start going down this road, they disengage. That's why you see the engagement rates from Gallup are as high as they are, right? And they've gotten slightly better, but there's a long ways to go. And you have to focus on creating that connection and organization. And it is hard. I'll give you some ideas on how to do this that have been highly effective in doing it. But if you don't prioritize things like that, you really are going to fall when it comes to employee experience. And then people want to find meaning and impact in their work. And I think a lot of times really what that is connecting them to their work product and how it's helping other people, and also how it's helping customers and outside people. And more that you can do that, I think the more people get excited and motivated to come to work every day. And then really the last thing here is the poor employee experiences. And I call them death by 1,000 paper cuts. And for me, I sort of laugh when I say this, but it's something that happens over and over again. When I talk to people about their frustration and why they're leaving an organization, they give me a myriad of reasons all the time. And there's a lot of opportunities that any company and any organization, no matter what the size, can do, right? The first thing is almost everyone complains about poor onboarding experiences, right? They feel like it's stressful, they don't really know what to do, they have a hard time integrating into the organization itself, they don't feel lack of connection. And so I tell people that is a critical stage to get people to feel comfortable and connected. It's more important than that than anything else, right? They might not be able to access all the resources, right? But that's one part of it. And I'd say the other onboarding is clearly setting out what are their goals and what do they need to get done in the first 90 days or 180 days. So they're clear on where they need to focus, right? And when that doesn't happen, over time, it leads to frustration. And that frustration ends up leading to disengagement, and they're disconnected, right? They stop showing the meetings, they stop putting the effort, they stop going out of their way to help people. There's a lot of signs. And then what happens, they start looking for another job and quit. In today's world of, full unemployment and a lot of jobs out there, you're seeing a lot more job hopping. And the reason is because of the death by 1,000 paper cuts over time. And people just get sick of it and they move on to the next organization, and they keep moving on to other organizations because they can't find that sense of fulfillment, that sense of happiness, the meaning in their work, and that connection. And they're going to continue to do that until they find that place wherever it may be. And so the question is, how do we go about doing this, right? How do we go about engineering this experience? And I want to show you a model that I've been working on for a while, and I'm constantly tinkering with this. It's something that can be really helpful for you as you're thinking about this. And these areas are multifaceted, but the first one is hands-on management, right? And I call this really a networked manager, and it's something that Gartner has talked about lately. And what that is that a lot of times managers try to help their employees almost too much, right? They aren't an expert in everything. What a hands-on manager does is they create a great team environment, right, which goes to the last pillar. They give feedback, they coach, they mentor, and then they find them the resources that they need to be helpful, right? That could be other peers, that could be other managers or other leaders, but they connect them to help. Because the challenge comes is that when you're trying to help someone and you don't know what it is to do. The other problem that ends up happening is that a lot of organizations, HR gives managers a mandate of coaching a certain amount, right? The average is somewhere around 30% of their time. Well, people end up don't doing that, right? Most managers, the data shows it's like 10 to 12% of their time. So if you don't use that time wisely, you're not going to help develop your employees and your team, and that is what people want, right? The next thing is meaningful work, right? They want to know that they're making an impact on the things that they're doing, right? That goes to your feedback, performance management, again, to the team environment, and then we go over to growth and opportunities, and that really comes down to learning and development, right? And that is a critical part of the employee experience, and partnering with those individuals that can help you or can promote that inside of your organizations. And some of those areas are the hard skills versus the soft skills, right? Hard skills you can learn by watching videos, watching online, and doing other things, and they're constantly changing, so you have to watch them. The soft skills are much harder because you have to actually experience them and practice them over time in order to really pick them up and get better at them. And so the soft skills are much more difficult and need to be worked on. And I always tell people when they're thinking about soft skill training, you want to do it incrementally and take chunks of it. A lot of times people do 2 to 3 day trainings, and that's just too much, right? People cannot use all that information, implement on a soft skill because these are hard enough. They're challenging their certain assumptions, right? You can also get other learning and technology platforms to help you. There's this company called, it's Humu, I think it is. It's by one of the leaders at Google that left, Laszlo Block, and it sends out reminders based on AI to help organizations and people on some of their skill sets, and also managers to help other people on the team. And there's plenty of things out there that you can implement and create in your learning and development platform, but it's absolutely critical. Obviously, it goes through the leadership and goes from top down. And then I'd say the last area here is really to focus on creating an environment where people can do their highly productive work. And a huge piece of that is creating a team environment where they can leverage each other, they can start to solve problems, they can lean on each other, and they can also work across the organization and find meaning in that. And you're seeing companies, I saw a company, Schneider Electric, doing something pretty innovative where they're having internal people post challenges and problems, and they're getting talent loaned to them to solve it, because a huge piece of learning is actually experiencing it, right, by doing it. And so by finding new opportunities across an organization, you can actually increase employees' ability to problem solve and be creative, right? So that's an innovative way of doing it, right? Your organization may not be as big, but I think what you need to do is focus on how can we get people to collaborate and work together better and get the most out of what they're doing today. And underneath this all is really, I call it the foundational layer. And again, it is where people fall down first because they don't have a solid foundation. It's like building a house on sand. It is like not caring for the roots of your tree. Eventually the tree will die, the house will collapse. And I call this extreme trust because it is an element of getting to know people and getting to understand what they care about, what they want, their pet peeves, their life experiences, because you can interact with them much better, right? And a way to think about this is think about the best team that you've ever been on, either personally or professionally. Think about that team and what you're able to accomplish. Think about how you thought about those people. Think about your connection. And then think about what you believed you could do in the future. And when you think about that team and that feeling, think about if you could take that team, right, and whether it's something that you did in your current position, another job, or maybe it's something that you did outside your professional world, if you could take that experience and every team you interacted with and were on were like that, think about what that would do for your career, your impact, and also all the other people around you. It'd be pretty massive in what would happen. And in essence, you built that extreme trust. You created what I call deep knowing, meaning that you know these people really well inside and out, right? Just as well as you know the people in your inner circle personally, right? It doesn't mean that you gossip about people. You don't have to know every single thing, but you can know a lot of stuff. You can know things like, you know, if you were to ask one person that helped you become the person that you are, who was that person and why? Right? What is your greatest achievement and why did it impact you the way that it did, right? What is the biggest blessing you've had in disguise? What's the most important lesson that you've learned the last year in your career, right? All that information goes into knowing who you are. Even things like knowing your pet peeves and other things help people to figure out how to work and interact with you, because otherwise what's happening is that people are having to predict, analyze, and then guess at how to do things, and that causes so much friction between people. The other part of this is psychological safety, and we'll go in a minute. And psychological safety is the ability to take risks, right? And success and risk, just like engagement and productivity, are the opposite sides of the coin. And you can't do great work if you are worried about failing and you are worried that it's going to be a mark against you. And you have to be around other people that support innovation and creativity and doing things that for the first time together. And that will require you to do things that won't work. And you're going to have to pivot, right? I'm sure you've heard all about pivoting in your career. Well, you have to pivot in your everyday job, in your profession as well. Now, again, the next part of this is connection, right? You talked about that already, and the caring part of it. And those all combined create extreme trust. And one of the challenges that happen with these poor employee experiences, and here's more data for you, and I'm not really going to go through this pretty quickly, but simple things like miscommunication, when you look at the data, costs $4,000 to $10,000 a year per employee, right? People quit because of their managers, obviously you hear about that, but a lot of the things that aren't people talking about is how much drama they're dealing with, right? One day a week, people are dealing with emails that are really not essential and not a part of their own job. So they're wasting a huge amount of time, and the dysfunction that's happening at the team level is really catastrophic, and senior leadership knows this, and that is why things are failing and not working across the board. But these are, I call them the silent killers, just sitting in the background, and people really aren't sure what to do with them and how to attack it, and the employee experience is really where you go. And so what do you start doing when you think about an employee experience? Well, I look at this as a journey. And one of the things is to apply design thinking, right? And design thinking is going in and talking to people, doing surveys, getting feedback. You could job shadow, really understand how does your employees go through their life cycle here, right? And you do that by number two is looking at the common moments across the board, right? Through hiring, onboarding, job changes, relocation if that's a matter, right? Virtual environments, whatever they might be, and look at those things and understand what people are going through, what are the concerns and what are their challenges. And you do that by interacting with them and asking questions and then creating strategies and programs and tactics and tools to help it. Now, you also can do segmenting, looking at your workforce and personas, right? And that typically starts to happen as you're getting in a larger organization. You'll need to do this. And you can think about these things as well as looking at people looking at the customer experience, right, and the customer journey. Well, now they're looking at it the same way with the employee as well. And it's something that if you start doing it, is going to make an immediate impact because people out there want to share information and they have the data to give to you, and it's much more helpful. And what's ended up happening, a lot of this is going back to lack of feedback. And what I'm seeing in companies as they're surveying and asking questions, they're getting back feedback and making changes that they could have a long time ago. They just never asked the questions, right? So the power is in the questions you ask, because then you have the data at your fingertips. Now, number four is really co-creating with people and other leaders to help them through the process and figuring out the challenges that they're having and then enrolling them in the process, because people will work with you and help you no matter where across the organization or what you're doing, as long as you motivate them and get them to be a part of it. Now, tools and platforms are important to check out. There's so many of them. That could also cause a lot of challenges too. By putting them together and piecing them together is also a challenging thing across the board. And now you're seeing people call employee experience platforms. Depending on the sophistication level and the budget that you have, always have to be aware of, the challenges that can arise from that. But there are a lot of quality tools and platforms and applications that can really do a great job. Now, number 6 is simplify. And I put it 3 times because as we saw the overwhelm, that becomes a problem. And when we don't do the employee experience journey and mapping, what ends up happening is something that happened at Coca-Cola, which I've spoken to people about. They had a credit card processing where they had to actually get a new credit card and apply for it and try to use it. And they went back and looked, and it took employees 52 steps in order to get that, right? I mean, it's a massive and waste of time in order to get something that simple. So a lot of times these little things end up bogging people down and spending an enormous amount of time doing them. Now, number 7 is using analytics, right? And the key thing is trying to get and look at the data. And again, there's a lot out there. Depending on the size and sophistication, you might have access to it, you might not have as much, but you can get some. And it can be your friend, and you can really look deep into what's going on inside of your organizations, right? And that's going to require you to partner with people like IT and finance as well in order to do this. Now, number 8 is something we'll talk about and prioritize building this. And I put that there because if you don't build a foundation, again, the rest of these things end up not working well, because I go in and work at companies all the time and we have to go back to the foundational layer because their challenges stem more from there than anywhere else, right? Now, the learning and development process is really important as well, and building out a systematic process in order to do that. And there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of processes that you can do, no matter what size of organization you're at. You can start somewhere. If you're in a larger organization, obviously you're going to have more resources that you can utilize, but no matter what size you are, you have to figure out a way to help your employees grow. Because if they aren't feeling like they're growing, then they're going to leave, because that is what people want today. And the other part of this is really getting regular feedback. I call it the killer app, right? It's getting feedback from the people in your organization on what's working and what's not working, so you can figure that out and you can keep getting it. They used to do it just with employee engagement surveys or other employee surveys, doing it once a year. I call that sort of 1.0. What you're seeing now in 2.0 and moving to 3.0 is people are getting feedback all the time. Now, not through necessarily surveys, but questions on Slack, job shadowing people, interviewing them, focus groups, other things. And so I encourage you over time to keep getting this data and keep asking questions, because you'll be able to solve a lot of these problems and really attack it much more successfully if you start doing this, right? And again, when you take a look at these 10 things, you can't do all of them simultaneously. You have to start picking where to go. And I think if you start looking, at some of these, you can start to really be much more successful as you piece them apart. Now, I want to go into some of the foundational layer things, because I find, again, when it comes to trust, it's the top of the list of everyone when they're talking about their employee experience. And so the key thing is, when I go ask people, okay, so how do you build trust with people? And I'll get a million different answers, and I'll get people usually hemming, hawing, not really knowing how to do this. And there is a science behind this as well as an art, and it is very complicated, and we are in the really, really early stages of how to do this. And I've spent probably now the last 4 years trying to figure out how can you skyrocket trust with people in minutes or hours than it would take in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years, because in an agile workforce, for people having to work with new people, right? New people are coming in, having to work across geographies, working groups, tons of other variables. We don't have time that you had before to build these relationships. So you have to fast track them, because we all know when we think about the best teams that we've been on, right, and those individuals that we work with best, that's what we want to have with every single person that we come across. And we have to do that because our work is dependent on collaboration. It's not dependent on solo work. So you have to build that close collaboration with people that care and want to be your advocates and go to bat and have your back. And I saw a study a couple years ago, right as I was doing my TEDx speech, by Professor Arthur Aaron. He was trying to build inner closeness between people, and I thought it was fascinating. I was looking at a New York Times article. A New York Times article was about a woman going to a bar and asking a man 36 questions, and they ended up falling in love and getting married. And of course, as I started to read this, I had to read the article, and then of course, I had to click on the study. I thought it was clickbait at first, but it actually was a research study. And what he did back in 1997 was to get grad students together who are complete strangers in a room and have them to ask very vulnerable questions to each other, right? 36 questions over 45 minutes. And of course, at every research study you read, the results are buried in the last page, and they're buried in other words, so it's hard to see them. And as I went through it and read the conclusion, I had to read it literally about 5 times as I remember it, because this really stood out to me. 30% of the people created the closest relationship in their life. Imagine that. Think about that. Complete strangers in 45 minutes created the closest relationship in their life. That is unreal. That means I could take every one of you that are listening, I could go out with you to a coffee shop, and I could introduce you to 4 people and you'd walk with the best friend. Or I could take you to your workplace and I could pull 3 or 4 people in a room and you'd walk away closer with at least one of the people significantly. And one of the things I found out from this, and I ran this obviously now with 25,000 people and in conferences in all types of environments, virtual and remote, video across geographies, everywhere else, that it's our ability to share our experiences and be vulnerable with other people is what makes us human and what brings us closer to other people. And it is much more powerful to do it actually in a group than one-on-one. So I took this, and the first time I did this was a group of people, and I didn't know anyone. I asked a friend to get people together I wasn't connected with on LinkedIn or Facebook, and I asked them these questions, not the one that I created. And I couldn't believe what people were sharing, and I couldn't believe that they were sharing in front of me, and also couldn't believe at how they were connecting and bonding with each other. And I thought that there was something pretty special with this. And as I was doing in groups and organizations, larger and smaller, I found some pretty amazing things happening at the level of closeness and engagement and teamwork and communication that happened, and the ability to trust other people. And I could see these things skyrocket. I tested it. I've given them before and after, pre and post surveys. And the numbers are pretty staggering, but it's how you end up doing it, because end of the day, trust changes everything. And the key is, how do you get it at that level? Because the questions people ask, right, when you first meet someone is, do I trust you or not? And then it's, how much do I trust you? And if I have extreme trust with you, and I'll explain to you what that is in a second, I put you into my inner circle. And when I put you in my inner circle, now I care about you more. I'll go to bat for you. I'll have your back. I'll be willing to innovate, be creative. I'll be willing to do things that I normally might not do, compromise on things, work through conflicts, communicate better. There's a lot of things that I'll do, and that helps you work better, that helps the other person work better, and that helps the team, and that helps the organization as a whole. Right? And this comes from a study in May of the Harvard Business Review, and I found other studies that correlated across peers and other things. What makes this really special is when you think about extreme trust and extreme distrust, right? You can see this on a 1 to 5. What really ends up happening is the bar is you either have it or you don't. If you have a relationship with someone and you just trust them, what I found out from the study, which is pretty staggering, and a lot of other data, you have the same engagement as someone you distrust. That is pretty staggering. If you either have a 5 or you have nothing. So that's why I told people to start here, because you get a 5, you have 8 times higher engagement. And when you saw that list that I showed you, the companies that were performing significantly better, and there's tons of similar data out there that you can find, that is what they have. They have that sense of trust across the organization, and it spreads everywhere. And that's the key to get it at that level. And like I said before, doing in groups is the way to do it much more effective. It scales a lot faster. And also when you do this in groups, and you can do this remotely, virtually, across everywhere else, what you'll find, and what I found, is that it spreads. Meaning that if you have 1,000 people in a room and you divide them into groups and you did exercises like these, people start applying it across all 1,000 people. It just doesn't just affect the group that they're in, they apply it across the entire organization. And that's what makes this pretty special and something that works really well. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about briefly is really psychological safety as a foundational layer, because Amy Edmondson, a Harvard professor, has done research for the last 30 years, and she went to Google back in 2012 because they were trying to look at how do we maximize performance across the company, because there were a lot of indicators on the best teams that they were doing things significantly better, selling more, they were getting lauded by Google execs twice as often. There was all this other data that was coming back, and they're like, well, if we could figure out how to engineer these teams like this, we could significantly and organically increase performance across the board. So they looked at everything and they couldn't find any individual indicators, right? What they found was the social connection between people was what made it special, and what was psychological safety as them banding together and working together. And what they found from that was that these are what these teams were able to innovate, grow, and work together, and they were much more resilient. They worked through failure, and they performed significantly better. And it didn't matter whether they were A players or B players or whatever it is. The psychological safety was not present. There was no high performance in Google across the board at any team, right? Doesn't matter whether you're in Canada, you know, South America, Asia, Europe, no matter where you were, this was the #1 factor. And so you have to have that. And what is psychological safety? It's really the ability to take risks with other people, right? To put yourself out there, to have conversations that are hard with other people, to raise and have healthy debate and challenge ideas in front of people, just as you would on the people that were on your best team and the team that you love the most. If you can't do that, you can't push things forward. And what ends up happening is you have these collapses, such as at Wells Fargo or Volkswagen, right? Or there's many other companies across the board where this lack of trust, this lack of ability to share and be open has caused a lot of challenges. And when I talk to a lot of leaders and managers, their concern all the time is that if I go and challenge an idea or I have a healthy debate with people, that there could be some repercussions depending on the group and individuals that I do things with. And so they're reticent in bringing forth ideas. And when that happens, it's often the people that stay silent are the ones that have the solution. And so creating psychological safety is something really important. And I'm going to go through these really quickly because I want to save some time for questions and go through a couple other things in the time that we have. But the key thing is trying to ask questions through here, is to share your own fallibility, right? Encourage team members to share the things that worked and didn't work, right? One of the studies I found Harvard did on 200 companies, they found the most successful companies actually had the most mistakes and errors. And then when they went back and looked at the data, they found that actually that wasn't true. It's just that they were actually more forthcoming in sharing it. So the key is you have to share these things, and people share their personal challenges. They're having everyone speak up. You can do simple things like when you ask a question to the group, have the most junior person speak and have the most senior person speak last. Well, that helps because you don't have bias, right? And so these are little things that you can do. One of them is appreciating other people, and we'll get into that before. Peer-to-peer recognition and other things can make a massive difference in what's going on and going forward and how you're being successful. So I want to go through some stuff here pretty quickly that you can do in your own environments and companies and organizations to kind of push this forward. And we're going to have some strategic things, and then I'm going to give you some tactical things that you can do. And then you can actually contact me if you need any of the tactical resources, and I can send you links and other things that you can utilize in your organization. So the learning and development I talked about before, you have to focus on the power skills. Those are things that are moving the needle and cause the most issues. When I deal with conflicts, and I did a lot of conflict resolution work, this lack of soft skills, the lack of power skills, the lack of being able to communicate, collaborate, and actually talk to each other about the problems that they're having are the biggest issues, right? When I go back, I'll find a conversation they had 3 or 4 years ago, essentially almost about nothing, was what caused the problem. And if all one of the two people would have done was to bring the other person in the room and say, the story in my head that I was making up was that you don't like me because of something I said. And the other person could have responded, and they would have quashed it. Instead, what's happened is their argument and disagreement has now splintered their team, their group, and it's now causing a massive problem across a lot of different people and affecting the organization as a whole. So the other part of this, the next one, is strategic recognition. And I think you can do this in many ways: employee recognition, peer-to-peer. And what the data shows you is that it increases engagement by 37%, performance will double or triple across the board. It's really important to do that. You can do things that cost zero money. And so it's not about all the things, perks that you need to do, right? I gave you a couple ideas beforehand. Sometimes people will do things like pass a trophy around, or whatever it's going to be. But when it comes at this level, you want to create what you want to reinforce and how you want to go about doing it based on the values and behaviors you want people to exhibit. Because that's how you're going to develop the programs, and that's how you're going to get people to do what you want. It's not just thanking people, it's having a logic and reasoning behind the things that you're doing as a whole, right? And I think the next part is really working with leaders and managers to make them much more effective. Because if you don't train and develop them, they will not figure this out. These are all learned skills and behaviors, and no one has the answers to these by themselves if they don't figure out what to do. And everyone can get better. People have a reticence on giving negative feedback and having hard conversations, right? But that is something that helps them. Like, I'll give one of my clients an exercise to do is to ask their employees on a scale of 1 to 10, and they ask their employees on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate our relationship? And why did you rate that? And how can I move it closer to a 10? Now, obviously, it's a very uncomfortable conversation. But after you do that for a few months, you get significantly better relationships with the people around you because you have honest, truthful, hard conversations, right? When you look at Ray Dalio, one of the most successful hedge funds in the world, or most successful one of Bridgewater Capital, he built the company on radical honesty. And their managers and employees are radically honest. Right? One of the employees gave Ray Dalio feedback years ago, not that long ago, that he gave a company presentation and left him a voicemail. And he said, on a scale of A to F, I give you a D. You're horrible. Never give a company presentation again if you don't prepare and you don't think it through. Now, imagine you're giving the CEO of your company and one of the successful companies in the world that feedback. There's not many people that would do that or get a voicemail, but that made a lasting impression with him, right? So the last one here is really bridging the distance. And I think for people that have remote, distant teams, and I just say across the board, is that you've got to bring people together and create one team, essentially, right? And that feeling of connection and belonging with people, because if they don't feel it, they will leave. Every human being needs to have this across the board. It is an essential part of the process. Now, here are some tools, and one of the first tool really is building deep knowing experiences to share things, right? And you can do this in person, in video, and you can actually probably do it through an email. There's ways of doing this, and I've created a game, Cards Against Mundanity, that to give you that gets at the core of getting to know people and who they are, their heartbreaks, their successes, the things that they want, and understanding them, because that's how we work better with the people around it. It's not saying that you have to like these people. It's not saying that you have to go out socially with them, but knowing them will help you interact with them much better and get them to do their greatest work. Because all of this stuff, you are dependent on other people doing great work, because that will reflect on you. So your career success is based on that. Then the next one is called Work With Me Manual. And these are things I'm finding that extraordinary managers are using in some form or another, and a lot of executives are using these as well. And essentially what they are is an instruction, right? It would be an instruction manual like you're going in the US to IKEA, right, and you're buying something, or anywhere else. And they have questions on there for you to get to know people well. What are their pet peeves? How do they like to collaborate? How can you approach someone and give them hard feedback? How, if you see them having a bad day, what can you say to them, or what can you do for them, right? And there's a list of questions, and once you can share them and get to know your team members, it helps you to work with them much better, and also to integrate other people into your team. right, across the board. And if you're working in new working groups, it also gets you to think about how you can work better with outside individuals as well. Now, the next one is a team operating agreement, and I'm not going to read this for you, but WD-40 has a great one for an employee agreement. It really sets a level of standards, and it is really telling people what it is that you're requiring of them to do, right? Part of the WD-40 employee agreement is we expect you to solve problems and proactively ask questions. And not knowing and not asking questions is not acceptable. And they go into some other stuff, but it's pretty short. You can do that at an organization level or on a team level, and it really sets another tone. Now, the peer-to-peer employee recognition are absolutely critical, right? And there are things that you can do across the board, like having a teammate of the week, right? You can have a trophy you pass along. I mean, there's tons of ideas that you can Google across the board in order to do these, and you can give people high fives. There's software tools out there today that you can actually use and implement. And you can do these at a pretty low-cost way. So it's something, again, that you have to link back with strategic imperatives, but it's something across the board I'm seeing more and more come up because they work. And the data shows that they'll make a significant impact. Now, coaching and mentoring programs, they have to be a part of what you're doing because the millennials and Gen Z, that is exactly the data I'm getting across the board. Every single person wants more of that. And it is a reason that they will leave. So having those programs and putting them in place are absolutely critical no matter what stage of organization you are. And you have to set up a program process because people don't know what to do when you talk about mentoring. You have to actually set up some formalized thing. Now, you can do it pretty quickly, but you do have to have some structure in it. And again, it's leveraging technology and mobility and doing these other things, right? And there's variable things that you can do here, right, depending on your resources and time. But it's time to think about these things and how can we integrate them inside of our organization in the things that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And again, here's kind of the model that we went through and talked about today and really what to do. And I gave you some ideas of things that you can start to implement. And really, no matter where you are on the continuum here, right, everyone is struggling. It's a wild, wild west. When I talk to people across the board, no matter what size organization that they are, everyone's struggling together because the people problem we're on the early side of it, of people really focusing on this. So don't really worry where you're at. You just have to get started on part of it. And I'd always start at the foundational layer because if you don't start there, the things that you build upon here aren't going to work very well. That's not to say I wouldn't be doing some of these other things, but I would be intentional about the other parts of it because if you don't, people won't figure them out. And over again, a lot of the work I end up doing is going back and putting these in place where they should have just taken the time to do them across the board. And it's complicated and it's hard. And you're going to have to test things and try things out for your environment, but you will find things that will work and work really well for people across the board. So that in mind, we'll take questions and I'll go through anything you have. And after the session, if you have any challenges or issues or want resources or other things, feel free to contact me. I realize we went through a lot of stuff. We went through it quickly, some of them at a very high level, and there's a lot more depth you may need. But I want to make sure that when you leave here, you can get some help and you can start solving whatever it is on your most pressing needs, especially as you begin to think about 2020 and all the things that you want to accomplish for yourself, both in your career and for your organization as a whole. So I'll start asking some questions and feel free to ask more, as many as you want. So I'll have to send you, someone asked you as organization tool, if organizations keep track of reminders for the organization. I'll have to, whoever that is, I'll have to follow up and get some more information about what exactly it is that you're looking for. If you can include some more of that, that would be helpful because there's a lot of different things that you could use across the board. There's another question that's a couple examples of vulnerability. Someone asked about what you can do. Well, one of the things that I share with people that I have leaders do is to share in front of their teams or managers, and it's having conversations in a group of people, the things that they have a hard time with, right? The things that they may not be doing as an effective job, or perhaps they did a program or a quarter of sales or something that they didn't do very well, or there were some challenges, that they can admit that things didn't work out, right? And they accept responsibility, but they need your help in enrolling in the process, right? Or they may share things with you about their life, their experiences, their heartbreak. They might say to you at time, like, you could ask a question such as, what is the biggest blessing in disguise, kind of get at some vulnerability. And you could ask people, so what's one of the biggest challenges that you've had in the last 5 years, and share it with other people, right? You can ask people, so what is it that you have a hard time doing? And all of those things build vulnerability. And vulnerability is also about having honest conversations with other people, right? Things such as, like, how can I really help you? I want you to do a better job. I want to be a better colleague, a better leader or manager. What can I do to change the things I'm doing to help you? That's being vulnerable, right? That's helping people. So that's something that I would encourage you to do. And it's about having these conversations on a continual basis with people. And when you do that, they will give you the answers, because people want to help. They want to share it. They're just not sure where to start, and they're not sure where to open up, because people get a lot of mixed signals. So it's dependent on the individual, right? When I hear about vulnerability, one of the things that I always hear from people is that I want everyone to be vulnerable. Well, the challenge is vulnerability starts with you, because when you're vulnerable with them and lead with it, and it doesn't have to be anything major. What it does is it says it's safe to share with me psychologically in our head, and that makes a significant difference in how people will start to interact with you, and also how they'll want to help you. So the next question comes from, how do we build a cache of supportive managers? Does the organization weed out those managers who are not likely to coach and mentor? I think you make it an imperative, and I think you do it through training and continual training and giving them feedback. I think you have to build in performance management tools. I think you have to do surveys. I think you have to do a lot of things. I think the managers need people to coach and mentor them all the way up to the top of the organization and help them. And I think as you're doing that, that has to be a major criteria, is that the people that don't want to coach and mentor, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to be involved unless you can find a way for them to be a solopreneur, meaning someone that only operates by themselves, which is very difficult. Now, there are people that aren't in roles where that is the case, but that becomes really difficult. Right now, there may be someone who's absolutely critical, who's not the best coach and mentor, and you spend time doing it, and you can find people workarounds on it, but that becomes really challenging as you're trying to scale an organization. And I find a lot of this stuff is just more want and more knowledge. And you have to spend the time teaching people how to give proper feedback to people, right? Like, if you have a hard conversation with somebody who's not performing, saying, I have high expectations of you because I know you can rise to the occasion, and here are the things that I want to work with you on, and then get their feedback and have a collaborative conversation with them. So I have another question on here. Do you find it more successful to have the trust building activity come from an outsider? I think that it can help. Depends on the level, right? When it comes to part of the when I go through the trust stuff, there's different levels of it. When I'm talking about probably at a manager level and above, part of understanding trust is the why, because you need to build it into your team. When you're talking about frontline employees and individual contributors, the understanding the why is less important and them actually doing it. So I think the outsider helps in the sense of teaching people that need to implement it and grow teams and doing it, why it's important, what's behind it, how it will benefit people. Because everything you're doing, like, I can send you all tools on this, it's a tool. Well, the tool is only as good as you understanding the strategic process behind it and the system that you set up, right? Because it's a helpful thing, but you have to understand why it's going to work and how it will benefit you, and then to watch it go through it. So it would be something that I would say that you would have to roll out in different ways. So another question I have here is, how can I work with remote or home offices across the board, I think you can do exercises like getting people to share information. I think you can do how to work with e-manuals. I think you can have a buddy system with people. I think you can take opportunities when you can get people together to share. I think the other part of it is to have exercises and conversations about attributing positive intent instead of negative intent. And what that means is a lot of times what happens is that with the people that we trust, we attribute positive intent, right? We figured, oh, they forgot to send us this, they were probably really busy. But the people that we don't have high level of trust, we say, well, they probably forgot about it because I wasn't important. They'll go to a negative place, and that starts to build distrust and wedges in the organization. So I think there's some strategic conversations about how to work with other people and things to think about and keep in mind, other things like empathy. And I think as you have these conversations as a team and can work together, you can start to see dramatic differences in how you are being able to be productive together and work together. You're seeing more and more organizations, some of them are actually purely remote. So they're having to do these at another level. And so it's important to sort of orchestrate and have a plan in order to do that, because what a lot of times people just do is let virtual and remote employees and other people just kind of, they're out there, right? They're doing something different and the teams will figure it out for themselves. And so it's something that you need to keep in mind as you're going forward and doing it.
Well, it looks like we're at the top of the hour.
Yep.
Looks like that's all the time we have for today. Jason, thank you so much for being here with us today and for a great presentation. And I'd like to especially thank today's webinar sponsor, Achievers, for making this event possible. Before you exit, please take note of the credit codes for today's event. The HRCI number for today's webcast is 504550. This webcast is also approved for SHRM credit. The SHRM credit code is 19-XEEEY. A slide with today's credit information is on your screen. You'll also receive an email from HR Daily Advisor approximately 24 hours after this event with a copy of today's credit information along with a link to the recording and any program materials. Please also note at the end of this webcast you'll see an exit survey. To make each webcast valuable to you, we'd appreciate your input. HR Daily Advisor and Achievers would like to thank you again for joining us. This concludes our program.